Hi, my name is Dan. I do security research online on VIS. I've done some presentations before at other conferences. First and foremost, I want to say that I need to send some respect to Sean's way. I'm only here because of somebody else's misfortune, so I want to honor my friend Sean by mentioning that I'm in his stead. So I'm the replacement speaker for a person that has the same subject material that I find hilarious, and he also finds hilarious. We collaborate a lot. So here's a long list of my very articulate and respectful credentials. You can see how much I respect the fire extinguisher credential and the how high is your barbed wire fence credential. Is there anybody in the room that has not heard of Shodan, that does not know what this thing is? Okay. Does anybody not know what a TCP banner is? Okay, good. So any Python people in the room? Python? You guys are going to you guys all of this. Okay, so Shodan is basically Google for TCP banners. Think of a search engine that aggregates essentially Nmap outputs. I mean, the scanner isn't Nmap itself, but basically you telnet to a port, you get a banner. Imagine putting that in a database and making it searchable, right? So the easiest way to use Shodan is to find an interesting query, and believe me, they're a lot easier to find than you think. My first foray into this was webcams. Many, like on the order of hundreds of thousands. And speaking of gold mines, this apparently is a March Networks webcam that is connected to a gold mine in France. Why it's online, I don't know why it's online, and I can just get to it by pointing my browser at it, even better. That screen, however, that this guy is looking at seems awfully familiar. It kind of looks so like, who watches The Watchers, right? Me. I watch The Watchers. And now for some crazy meta. This is a webcam that I found recently that is in somebody's office, pointed at somebody's display. You can see these two gentlemen here chatting about something. And you can see behind the guy, there's a monitor there. This guy sits with his back to the camera, works on AutoCAD stuff all day. And after a little while of watching this guy, as it turns out, this camera is in the company that makes the cameras, and this guy that I'm watching is working on the PCBs to put into the camera that I'm watching him with. So that's like too many levels of recursion. Like, wow. Other interesting things like, oh, okay, I have a SCADA network. I'm going to air gap it. I'm going to keep it off the internet so people can't get at my SCADA network, but I'm going to put a public webcam pointed right at the interface. Rad. Good job, guys. This one I found yesterday at 9 a.m. while I was in the speaker room screwing with my slides. Anybody want to take a stab and guess at maybe what you guys think this is? There it is live. This is an ATM in Italy that some genius has duct taped a cam to and put the cam online. And you can sit here and you can watch people walk up to this ATM and take out money. You can watch people walk up and smoke and do whatever. It took me a little while of trying to think of what on earth this could be. I kind of doubt that, only because of the brand of camera, but like, you could presumably, like, if you're really lucky, you could see guys walk up and like, install this camera. But no, it took me a while to try and figure out why people were walking up to this camera and putting their face right into the camera. Well, who would be okay with that? And then it dawned on me that they probably aren't super cognizant of the camera because it's probably sitting behind one of those little infrared screens. It's just a little black rectangular box. So yeah, live camera in Italy. Rad. So cameras, for the vast majority, that's like those 2 or 3 cameras I found are the interesting ones. I am finding these things on the order of tens of thousands, and that's probably the most interesting stuff I've found so far, but that's a whole other talk that I'm preparing. But for the most part, cameras are horrifically boring, so you can do that all day, but you'll fall asleep. I found this, and had absolutely no idea what it was. This is one of these things where you telnet to it, and it starts telling you things. So this is like your fun information disclosure. Like, obviously, the security department of this organization didn't get to these people before they put this thing out so people could buy it. You telnet into an IP address, and you get this. And I looked at this when I found it and said, what on earth? So I Googled for some of the stuff. It says T2000 somewhere here. What is T2000? CC user interface, okay. After a little bit of Googling, I found out it's a hydrogen fuel cell. Hydrogen fuel cell, predominantly in the United States, connected to cell phone towers that are on hilltops where power is sometimes tough to route, and in the event that there is some sort of weather, maybe it's industrial, it looks like it can withstand a beating, it's made to be, it's a UPS basically. It gets used in a lot of military applications, hilariously, because if you start looking around for these things, whoever designed or whoever put together these PDF documents was very liberal about where they went, so just a little bit of OS int, and here you are. Here's all the military installations where these things are installed. Awesome. Here's how you use it, here's how you connect it to things, and besides this documentation, like, where else could I expect to find these? Like, okay, that's kind of cool, but what if I want to go touch it? Oh, they put that in the talk too. Like, they go in buildings like that, and the fuel cell goes here. Rad. Wind farms, those large, several 100-foot tall wind mechanisms that generate power. This one's spitting out 37 amps. Not bad. Same thing, web server, no creds, no auth. You point to browser at an IP address, and this is what you see. Lighting, HVAC, alarms. This is some cathedral somewhere on the East Coast in the United States. You can control the temperature in a variety of these little sections. Every room that's labeled, you can control heating for. In this particular venue, I think they also had the alarms and the lights for the platform connected to it as well. So you could really ruin somebody's day if they're on stage doing whatnot and the lights go nuts. You have a lot more HVAC and lighting stuff, same sort of deal. I love how these guys are considerate enough to put the floor plan up so that if I really want to mess with somebody just there, I can. The power meters that are online are also quite interesting. A lot of these things are aggregated. In this case, I'm pretty sure this was the front end to like an apartment building, and the apartment building was aggregating all the power from a floor. A lot of these things you'll start to see will have graphs, which I'll get into a little bit later, but it's really funny when you start aggregating the graphs for power usage, because you can do really interesting things when you start looking at very finite data. There's heat pumps that you can find. These are the HVAC systems I mentioned earlier, where you can control certain valves. You can control, like, there's a water return valve and a water supply valve you can turn on and off. You can mess with the temperature. In this particular system, you can see, generally speaking, everything that's broken out into its own section you can mess with, you can turn on, you can turn off. There's valves, you can change temperatures. By and large, in small environments like this, it's mainly just fun, I guess. I haven't actually tweaked anything myself. This whole thing has been like a read-only exercise for me, but they get bigger. So like this system here is the same kind of deal. It's the same brand of system. I think it was a Tritium Niagara system. And here you actually have a variety of different pumps that you can open and close, and you have a high pressure and a low pressure system, which starts getting really interesting for anybody that watches Mythbusters. They did like a bit about exploding water heaters, maybe, kinda. Could start getting interesting. Here's where it gets really crazy. This is I think it's Italian. I'm not even sure what this is. All I know is you can change the frequency of the pumps. And when you have something this big, when you have stuff that's measured in like the thousands, and you have access to the pumps, that's when it gets interesting. Like, this should not be online, like, at all. Interestingly enough, and I'll get to it later, I had to write a tool that did screenshots of VNC, right? So if you have like 1,000 VNC servers that are online, and you want to connect to all of them to take a screenshot, like, doing that manually sucks. So I had to try and automate that. This is a problem that I wish that I had. This is a private residence. This is somebody's house. That is big enough to warrant a SCADA system to control HVAC. Yeah, so when we start talking about graphs, this is where it gets really interesting, right? So you got this house and the graph. When are they home? When is the AC on? When is the AC off? You know, what does it look like when they're playing video games? What is it, you know, ad nauseum, that sort of line of questioning, right? What can you do when you have a graph of the power consumption of a place and you can tell, you know, hey, maybe I want to make it 4 degrees in that room right now. Boop. Water heaters, the simple ones that, black plastic stuff goes on the roof, cold water goes up, hot water comes down, goes into a tank. Yep, they're online too. Why? I have no idea. This particular one is a bit of hilarity to me. A lot of you, especially anybody from the United States, will probably see that thermostat and think that it looks very familiar. And that's probably because they're all over the place. One time I was hilariously sat in traffic school, and there was this exact thermostat on the wall. And for the life of us, and there was a bunch of computer people there. I was the only InfoSec guy in the room, but there were like 4 of us huddled around in front of this thermostat trying to figure out why on earth it was so cold in the room. And after I found this, I just laughed to myself because I figured there's probably some kid in another room on the wireless network connected to this web interface watching us try and turn the temperature up going, ha, nope, click, 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 right? So that was, I can only laugh, right? And these things get bigger, right? It scales. So Siemens makes equipment that's like this. And this, for all intents and purposes, is a series of relays with a web server in it. I have no idea why there is this prevailing wind of people saying, hey, cool, something, let's put a web server on it and put it online. Like, this is a popular thing to do, apparently, and the interface looks like this. Now, this is where it starts getting really interesting because these are like giant boiler systems in huge industrial buildings. These are like, if you need to heat 10 floors or 20 floors, this is the sort of stuff you use. This is where it starts getting really weird because there's these massive boilers and you have these controls for them and you can mess with things. So presumably, if these boilers don't have the same sort of security controls consumer water heaters have on them, like consumer water heaters won't let you blow them up. You actually have to like break the security system to make them explode. I have no idea about these. I've never actually worked in an industrial setting like this before, so I couldn't say whether they have those kind of security controls, but it's definitely an interesting thing to consider, right? Overall on these things, security is a horrific, horrific joke. I really wish that I was as elite as some of the people in the crowd and that I could do like crazy reversing stuff. I can't. I'm an idiot. What I do is I open it in VI. There's a web interface that this thing came from, and the file name is up there on the left, background.tech, right? So if you look at the source code of this web interface, it points at this file when it submits the credentials, right? Well, you know, it's obviously not admin, right? But you open it VI, and the clear text password is displayed for this particular system. It was one of the previously screenshotted power meter displays. And if for anybody that can't outwardly spot the password, I've highlighted it for you. So, good job, guys. You asked for the password on one screen, but you're giving me the file that has the password in it as well. Simple as W get. Like this is pretty brainless, right? So what can you do when you find this sort of stuff? Like this is basically an information disclosure fire hose. So level 1, let's do some very simple recon. Just Google, right? So we find a March Networks camera. This is what we see on the March Networks camera. Interesting. There's a stock room, and there's a back gate, and there's some cars, and you can tell, okay, this looks like America. You know, you look outside and you see the sun, and you look over here and you see the sun. You're like, well, they're probably on the same continent. Might not be in the same time zone. The top right camera up there is a PTZ camera, and if you select it, you can pan around and look at stuff. That's kind of cool. That's the front lobby. So some very quick observations. There's this neat tool that I used called Chrome Ultimate Flag. Chrome Ultimate Flag will show you this kind of stuff. It'll show you, based on the IP address that you're connected to, here's where we think it lives. Here's the trustworthiness of it, which for the most part we can ignore. All I care about is where it is physically, right? So I'm like, all right, cool. It's in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Sweet. Let's take that PTZ camera and we'll put it over against the front door because the front door has the logo on it. However, it's backwards, right? So you have to take a screenshot and flip it. Can anybody read that line under the black box? It says security integrators. Good job. Security integrators, public webcam, rad. And you could pan around and you could watch the receptionist on Facebook at the same time. I'm like, wow, you guys are, wow. Champions among men. Based on that information, you could find out where the company was, because their logo was what was on the little black box. This is as close as Google Street View would let me get. If you go up this road on the left about 100 yards and turn right, that's their building. So it's unfortunate that Street View didn't go up there, but yeah, you could virtually case the joint, right? So level 2, interactions. This is fun, but as a disclaimer, I should say that these images came to me as sort of a ha ha ha, I saw your talk, look what I found, from a random online. Like I mentioned before, there were a lot of webcams that I had found, and in this particular case, somebody had found a pizza joint that had their security webcams publicly accessible, publicly addressable, publicly accessible. So somebody went to this pizza joint's website and started convincing several of the people that worked there that they were IT, and that you can see in the top left monitor there has a brown wrapping paper wrapped around it. They had convinced this poor girl and her coworkers that there were problems with the computers, and the only way that these problems would go away was if they wrapped random crap in the office with paper and tinfoil and held up signs. And this went on for hours. There's 24 of these, and they had her waving, yeah, we're watching you through the camera. There's some people I know that say that social engineering isn't security, but you call a place and you tell them I'm watching you on your camera, and suddenly you can do whatever you want. Social engineering is in fact a big deal. You can hate all you want, haters gonna hate, whatever, but proof, right? So on to more interesting things, I found a SCADA system that had 14 massive evaporative coolers connected to it. Now, again, I'm not an industrial person. I've never worked in an industrial setting. I have no idea what one would do with 14 of these, but they're very large and they make things very cold. Hilariously, the Java applet that it pops also saves the name of the machine that connected to it. So the name of for example, owner PC and Dennis's MacBook are saved in this log. So if presumably you're a freelancer hired to do a pen test on this organization, now you know who and what laptop people use to connect to the system to administrate it. Hilariously, these guys, I have to give them some props because I derped and my computer name came up in there, and I got an email from Dennis who said, "What is interloper and why is it talking to my stuff?" To which I replied as much of a canned response as I could. You were part of a survey. Your system is publicly accessible without credentials. The reason that things are connecting to your system is because it's on the internet and random people can find it. I didn't get a response, but this thing was no longer online after that. So that's good, yeah, good on that guy, right? Does anybody know what Lieberts are? Anybody work in a data center? No? Lieberts? Yeah? 1, 2 guys? Okay, so Lieberts are gigantic refrigerator-sized UPS devices. They're for a data center that wires all of their racks into this thing, so if power to the data center goes away, there's several minutes of battery power. Has anybody ever tried putting a UPS into test mode before? Do you know what happens when you put a UPS into test mode? It disconnects the battery from the circuitry. So publicly accessible gigantic battery, predominantly used in giant computing settings, publicly accessible, that you can put into test mode. So you can make some data center have a very, very bad day. This is a VNC touch panel that was found. I honestly have no recollection. I can't remember what this thing was supposed to be doing. It's pumping some kind of fluid, and it's measuring things in the thousands. This could be a water pump. It could be a sewage pump. I'm not 100% sure. But the way that these particular panels work is you VNC into them, and then your cursor, you can control the touch panel. And this is presumably an 8-inch touch panel like this. That's on a wall somewhere. So this thing, people will look at it and think it's an appliance. They won't consider it a security device. This thing probably doesn't have logs. There's no way to, there is a way to make this thing more secure, but my suspicion is that the people that install things like this are facilities people, are people that operate with, electricians, things like that. Not people that are of super security mind. They're not considering that these things are publicly available. So level 3, a little scarier, stuff that can actually be abused and is a little bit scary. LawnWorks devices called ILON. ILON is, so as previously mentioned, that Siemens device, that's basically a bunch of relays with a web server on it. Siemens makes those as well. They're called ILON. And they're stackable, kind of like Devo hats. You can select one and call it your master controller, and this master controller will control several dozen other controllers. You can see some IP addresses here on the left. They're all controlled by this main ILON server. These other addresses are password protected. This one, hilariously, is not. So I think this is Dutch, which is interesting because of where we are. It wasn't in English, so I started Googling around. I went down this list on the left here, and I started trying to find stuff that seemed interesting, and the first thing that I keyed off of was this, like, 6th entry here, Gigantium. Like, what is Gigantium? What is that? So I looked it up, and it's kind of like the San Diego Convention Center. It's this place where you can have sporting events, and it's a place where you can have people and stuff, and lots of lights, and concession stands, and under that wooden floor is a ice rink that you can hilariously defrost if you find yourself bored enough. For the purposes of lols, they have included a very colorful diagram of their facility. Should you be interested in renting it for them, they're being very delightfully articulate with the stuff that they're posting. Another thing in that list earlier was this HITB strand camping place. Just from their main website, I can only go on speculation to see what these systems control, but you can see in this bottom frame here, there's this huge solar array on top of one of the buildings, so maybe the ILON system is controlling that, or maybe it's controlling the water pumps for their water park, or things like that. Scholar Up Clit, I guess, is a camping place. Another, like, you go and you rent a cabin. This place actually looks kind of cool based on its photos, but same sort of deal. This is one of the places that's controlled by that main ILON server. And the list goes on. It's something like 36 businesses, all in essentially Copenhagen, like downtown Denmark. That's kind of scary. Like that movie, Die Hard 4, Fire Sale, kind of maybe a little weird. You know? So people would think, oh, phones are fine, right? Phones don't have to listen on ports. Like, they're connected to the internet, but, you know, you don't run web servers on your phones. Well, some people do. Some people put code repositories on their phones. iPhone developers, specifically. This is a webcam that's connected, that's being hosted from an Android phone that's online, well, at the bottom says, click here to play audio in the external media player. This is a full-on, like, audio and video stream from wherever this phone is. And there are several of these things online. One of them, unfortunately, I didn't include the screenshot, was inside of a hamster cage. It was monitoring the hamster on a phone. Like, somebody duct-taped a phone to a hamster cage. I don't know, don't ask. Stoplights, intersections. This is a system called Autoplate. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is not Autoplate. This is Econolight. Econolight is the systems that control red lights, or stoplights. They're listening on Telnet, and you can just connect to them and do things. You have to Google the the documentation for these systems, because it's not very straightforward. But when you get in, danger, do not use while controller is being used for traffic control, or serious damage, injury, or death may occur. Like, a lot of this stuff can go into test mode, which is hilarious because, like, all of it's live. So in this case, you can put stoplights into test mode. Well, there might be cars going through those intersections at the time, so that's going to get very colorful. Autoplay is another very similar system. I originally thought that these were red light cameras, but they're not red light cameras. They're a little more interesting, and I'll get into that in a second. But the interesting line is here: basic VES with no security. Good job, guys. The company that makes Autoplate is called Pips. They also, and this is where it starts getting kind of creepy, put this system on police cars. There are police cars in the United States driving around with this system on them, and what this system does is OCR and recognize license plates and photograph them. And originally I had thought, oh, these are people running red lights, and then I watched, and after I got like to 40 or 50 people, I'm like, there aren't 40 or 50 people running red lights. This is everybody. These systems are in place, and they are taking pictures of every single car that goes through the intersection. Why that is, I don't know, but that line of speculation makes me nervous. And they're putting this on cop cars too, so like, I don't know what they're doing, but like, the hilarious part about these systems is that since there's basic VES with no security, you can change where the pictures go. You can just tell it to FTP the pictures elsewhere. Should you, yeah, you want to ruin somebody's day. There you go. These guys, after this, I had decided it would be a good idea to see if I could find signs that are like over freeways that tell you this lane is closed or that lane is closed or this much time until downtown, etc., stuff like that. I'm like, how awesome would it be to take over one of those signs, right? Well, I got to give these guys props because Daktronics is the company that manufactures the signs. They look kind of like this. This is a really bad screenshot. They're this big. They didn't really provide a lot of media. But all these systems, there are some of these systems online, but like they provide no data, no information leakage at all, and you can't Google for default creds. So props to Daktronics. These guys are, so far, arguably probably the most secure out of all of these different vendors I found. RuggedCom, for anybody that saw the news last year and all the hilarity about these guys, RuggedCom is another vendor that makes pieces of hardware for low-level controls, SCADA type stuff. Does anybody want to give this is another one of these places that either you try and log in and the username and password are already pre-populated when you browse to the site, or there's just no credentials at all. Anybody want to take a guess as to what these creds are? Yeah? It gets better. It gets better. No? They are, I'll give you a hint. They are what you think they are. The way I got this screenshot was by using a plugin for Chrome that just deobfuscates asterisked text. So this device is transmitting to you credentials that you didn't have before and then putting asterisks over them. What? Okay, whatever. So the hilarity continues, right? I find this thing. And I'm looking at this going, this looks like a 13-year-old defaced, like some 13-year-old kid found something, drew this crap in MS Paint, and defaced it. I'm like, whatever. And I went and I looked at it, I'm like, oh, it's a SCADA box. And I went and I looked up the SCADA stuff, and the SCADA stuff says you can host some of your own content on it for the purposes of like making it look, brand it to your company's brand or what have you, right? So I take a screenshot of this and I put it on Twitter, and I'm like, whatever, this is retarded. Some kid defaced this and whatever, and I move along smartly. I got a message from M. Toeker, I think his name is, who now I found out is like this hardcore, old school, 20-year veteran of SCADA security. At the time, I had no idea who he was, some random on Twitter. He's like, no, you can actually run all that Java. It's not malicious. Because originally I was saying, oh, look at this, it's all BS. Like, look at all this Java and the way, who in the right mind was design something that looks like this and expect somebody to take it seriously? Like, no, that's totally malware. And the guy was like, no, it's actually not. You can run that. I'm like, you just want me to like run your malware, right? You being the Russian guy, you want me to run your malware? No, sorry. No, you can run it. So all right, fine. I spin up my VM, and I open the site in a VM on Windows. Everything's all snapshotted, and there's AV, and it's segmented from my network, and I see this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a lot less scary. But what I'm seeing here is like production journal error turbine 2, 54,936 kilowatt hours. That's 54 megawatt hours. And at the moment, it's generating 1.1 megawatts on one turbine and 1.1 on the other. This is a power plant. Oh boy. And then my new friend on Twitter follows up by sending me an email to this article, which is a very poorly translated, I sent it through Google Translate, where it basically explains how to live next to a dam if you don't know what can happen. Yesterday, a meeting was organized in Femel in the presence of all the authorities to take stock of the situation, and very soon it seems that the appearance of criminal acts Friday has passed. Basically what they're saying, TLDR, this dam has been online for years, and other people have found with it and messed with it, and it's flooded residents. And it's flooded residents several times, and apparently the people that run the dam just don't give a crap. So I put that on Twitter, and literally a day later, the DHS called me. Like the next morning at 8:45, my phone rings, and I look at it, and it's some unknown number. Hello, this is Dan. Hey, my name is Anthony. I'm calling from the DHS. I'm like, oh, am I in trouble? And he's like, no. I'm part of a group of the DHS called ICS-CERT. Our job is to find these kinds of systems and work with the researcher, you, to contact the system owner and tell them they're doing something very silly and that the system should be either secured or taken offline. Are you willing to help us? And I said, oh, well, yeah, you're not going to clap me in iron, so yeah, I'm all in. You have like anything I can do to help out, right? So that was cool. I met him at DEF CON later, the guy that called me. He's a really awesome dude. I can't say that I'm jealous of their job. These guys actually, ICS-CERT in the US called ICS-CERT in France. ICS-CERT in France found the system owner and called them, and they said, your dam is online. And they went, all right, we'll get around to it. And as of like a month ago, it's still online. So I tried. Like, I got 2 governments involved, and they still didn't fix it, so I give up, right? Also, hilariously, for those developers in the house, that UI was built in front page. If you go to the source code and you look, it was built in front page. There is front page on SCADA. And somebody paid money for it. And then they put it on the fucking internet. Oh, so you'd think they'd learn, right? But they don't, because I found this last week. It's another hydroelectric plant in France. This is a 3rd hydroelectric plant in France, and this might either be a 4th or connected to another one. But like, the hits keep on coming. Like, what are you doing? It's like a fad. I have not found any other power plants in any other countries except France. I don't know what their deal is, but I guess it's, I don't know, maybe are they keeping score? We're losing. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Ever since I was a kid, I thought it would be really, really cool to mess with satellite systems. And when I finally found them online, they were horrific, like the webcams, horrifically boring. It's basically like a modem. It says, I transmitted this much and I received this much. I'm like, well, that sucks. I was hoping for something more interesting. But yeah, these things are online too. NAS storage arrays, for those of you that will go to retail outlets and buy NAS devices that are networked and put them on your LAN. In some cases, maybe they're UPnP enabled and they're just talking online and you don't know it, so that's something to look into. But yeah, what good is your super secure firewall and your super secure systems if all your backups are publicly available? Like, smooth. This was also a surprise to me. I had no idea that you could telnet into a car wash. These car washes have a Windows CE backend and a little panel. It's the same sort of deal like the Niagara Tritium systems. It's a little panel on a wall somewhere, and you walk up and you touch the panel. This one is particularly hilarious because you can, there's like emergency mode you can put it in, and it like locks the car inside and turns a siren on. So like, I don't know, senior prank if you can find where these things are, but car wash, I don't know. Humidifiers. When I found this, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Vapor. This is where Duke Nukem, 3D. What was the new one? The new one. Anyway, bad joke. These things are huge, the same size as the Lieberts, these giant refrigerator-sized humidifiers. And you think, well, okay, well, how big of a deal is that, right? Well, they put these things in burn wards in hospitals, so you really want to make some people's days miserable. That's another thing. Also, if you look for the company that manufactures these things, they really brag about being able to connect directly to the board. Like, here's a dude plugging the internet directly into the board. A lot of their marketing material also says that they're in the White House, which is also a very interesting thing to consider. So, cool. They're online. They're on the internet. You can talk to them directly. The internet talks directly to the board, and they're in the White House. Good to know. Emergency telecommunications gear. So, like VoIP systems that like 9/11 and first responders use. Those things are online. Same thing. You can point a browser at them. No creds. You're right in. This is what the interface looks like, and it'll tell you call logs with full phone numbers, and in some cases, and very rare cases, recordings and call duration. So that's interesting. You can see who's calling 911 and why, and apparently it still thinks it's 1970. Good to know. So like this is probably something that somebody pulled out of a box and put online and never touched again. They never logged into it to change the security settings, right? Here's something I'll leave up just for a moment so you guys can read it. Feel free to point and laugh. In fact, it's encouraged. Yeah. 10th of August, 2001, support for Netscape 6, rad. Script found in geocities.com/holy crap geocities. I didn't think that you'd want to be able to connect a web server to speakers, but you can. And yes, you can send it music, and yes, it will play the music. Somebody thought this was a good idea. I don't know. Some of these SCADA devices are not used to control big, scary industrial stuff. This one is in a hotel in New York, and it's used to control champagne. Yep, this is attached to their restaurant and their bar. And there's an alarm for the champagne. This is the layout that was also conveniently included in the UI. You can see that their champagne cooler has 2 temperature sensors in it. No, I'm sorry, it's not 2 temperatures. So there's an RH sensor and okay. So originally I had thought this thing must be massive because it's got 2 temperature sensors in it, and that's probably a lot of champagne. you can defrost the champagne and make somebody's day very, very bad. Expecting that you have a cooler just for champagne, there's probably some, I would argue, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of champagne in, a fancy hotel in New York. CERN, if there's any CERN people in the room, a lot of CERN is online, like a lot. So this is a functional test monitoring page. Not 100% sure what it's for, but it's very long. This is only the top part of it. LDAP users by geography. Really? LDAP users by geography. Okay. Yes, and this does have legs into their LDAP system. A map of all of their compute nodes, their names, and how busy they are. Okay, getting a little weird. They're network diagrams. I don't even have to try. Like, you point a web browser at an IP and you get this. What do? You want a virtual machine at CERN? Because you can do that too. Like, this was a screenshot from a Google Earth plugin. If you go to a certain page, it loads Google Earth in the browser, and back like this slide, it's that, except interactive. You can see what nodes exist, who they're talking to, if the bandwidth is good or bad, and what the free versus busy resources are. You can see by it's like a green-red pie chart. You can see how busy the compute nodes are. I had about 400 of these findings. So I contacted CERN and said, you guys might want to know about this. And props to them, almost all of them are now offline. Like the result list went from like 400 and some change to like 40. And they wrote back and they explained, yeah, well, CERN is an academic network. Our purpose is to allow people access to things, and our purpose is to make sure that people can freely get into this and do stuff, and right. So I'm glad to see that 6 months later, a year later, most of these things are offline. So props to CERN. If anybody wants to go skiing, there are ski lifts that have gondolas that are also online for some reason. I had to go use a lot of Google Translate for this one. You can set it from sunny mode to not sunny mode, which is kind of cool. And you can really make somebody have to change their pants because you can open the doors while this thing is moving. So like, imagine being in a gondola and it stops and the doors open. Like, why it's online, I don't know, but dude, okay. These things are online too. Gigantic solar arrays. Huge industrial, like quasi-power plant style solar arrays. Here's the documentation for them. And here's their interface, but thankfully for them, it's horrifically broken, so I couldn't do anything. There's a lot of really silly JavaScript that it runs. So much JavaScript so that it's preventing the page from even loading like column headers and stuff. So yay for them, I think. This may or may not be attached to the same kind of solar array, but I think it's in Italy. And you can see that since the 16th of November 2010, it's generated 350 megawatts of power. And right now it's generating 64 kilowatts. So that's a big solar, like for anybody that's ever played with solar or done solar stuff, that's a lot of solar. Creepy mode enabled, trace view. These are human beings connected to a heart monitor. This is in a hospital, and this is for 16 people, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 6 or 7 people with some blanks. This is like the nurse station where they're monitoring all the rooms so they don't have to manually walk into every room to check to see if the people are alive. This, some genius decided, would be a good idea to put a web server on. It runs Windows, and when you browse to it, there's a button that says, like, click here for full screen, and it pops an RDP. It downloads an RDP connector, and if you run it, it connects you to this with no creds at all, and you're looking at like a heart monitor. And there's dozens of these online. This is just one screenshot, but like, yeah, that's like, hello HIPAA. Home automation systems. You want to, do the whole Beetlejuice thing and start getting people's houses to start changing shape. this is somebody's home automation system, and you can control their garage door and their alarm from it. And you can see like occupancy on or off, and you can tell it, you can change the temperature of the place. It's like the same SCADA systems, but like, I guess this is an iPad in somebody's house. This is one that I found a couple of days ago, .gov oopsies. Has anybody ever seen these things before? Oh, I see them every once in a while. These are large, high power, directional, like backhaul antennas. It's for 802.11a through n, for like you have a building here and you have a building there, but you don't want to use telco because you have super secret stuff. You want to transmit your super secret stuff directly to the other building. This is the vendor's website. Some very interesting language involved with these particular pieces of equipment. Somebody decided that we're .gov people, and we want to be more private than everyone else. We don't like the fact that wireless networking is done with all this commodity hardware, so what we're going to do is create a new piece of spectrum, or borrow somebody else's piece of spectrum, and operate at 4.9 gigahertz, and that's going to be just our super secret government network stuff. And nobody can talk to us on this frequency because we're going to make sure that only we can have the hardware that talks on this frequency. Except they put it online, and it listens on SNMP, and that little white box is somebody's name that operates this piece of hardware. And SEM stands for Security Emergency Management, and it's a division of the government. And you can find this person online with one Google query. So their super secret plan to have their super secret stuff is on the super secret internet, and anybody with super secret SNMP walk can point it at an IP, and SNMP walk v1-c public, and you get that. Smooth. I never thought I would find fish on the internet. There's this company that makes these devices that talk to refrigeration units called, I think the brand is Riot. So Hayman's Fisheries is a place in Oxford, and there is a lobster chill cooler. Lobsters. I found lobsters. I'm in your SCADAs monitoring the temperature of your lobsters. But wait, it's lobster chill mode, right? And we can't forget the champagne. So, again with the weird swimming pools. Why? Why is there swimming? Wait, there's an acid pump. I have control of an acid pump. Why would you give me control of an acid pump? Don't give me control. Don't give me control of an acid pump. Why? What am I going to do with that? You can put it in manual mode, and you can just empty the vat of acid into the pool. Really? If you have one of these or have friends that have one of these, tell them please take it off the internet. For Monkey Island fans in the crowd. So, consider the following. Your 80s style horror flick scenario, right? Bunch of sexy teenagers in a pool. Jason Voorhees shows up to slice them up, right? But his victims are actually soup because you turned on the acid pump. And now Jason Voorhees is pissed. You don't want to piss off Jason Voorhees. That never ends well. So, let's say you find a lot of this stuff on your Banjo Dinosaur Knitting adventure. Lots, 50,000 or 100,000 results. For example, one brand of webcam that I found, if you search for Netcam in particular, you'll find 186,000 results for just that one query. So what do? How do you parse that? You can't go to 186,000 websites by hand. That's just a pain. So you screenshot all the things. 50,000 sites by hand sucks, and screenshots are way faster. So I wrote a thing that goes to all of these places and takes screenshots, and it's multi-threaded, and I put it on GitHub, and it's really neat. I had a lot of help. My friend Paul, who is a Django guy, basically took my horrifically bad code and rewrote it so that it's usable and workable and deployable to the cloud. This Eagle Eye 2 repo that he's got is set up in such a way that should you have access to, let's say, 500 or 1,000 EC2 instances or machines on the internet or a giant Hadoop cluster or something, you can say, let's take that 186,000 result query and feed it to that and have this thing go and produce all the screenshots. To find some of those interesting panels, I had to do that with VNC. So I'm starting to realize I'm finding myself on a rabbit hole of screenshotting all the things, and now I have a bash loop that will screenshot VNC. So you can go and find VNC hosts and hand it to this tool, and it will take a screenshot for you. So maybe you're less altruistic or less inclined to find comedic things on the internet than me, and you want to own them all, you can do that too, since you have an API, a Python API you can query using Python. You can take your results and you can pipe them straight into an RC file for Metasploit. So you can do a search for something that you know is interesting, like let's say you're hired to do a pen test against an organization that has several hundred machines that are in Amazon EC2. So you run your scan, you find out they're all listening on Samba. Cool. You can pipe that right into Metasploit, and this is I think this was NetBIOS. I think this was a talk that I did at a conference last year, and for that the live demo was scanning for all listening NetBIOS hosts in China, and then piping it directly into Metasploit and using the NetBIOS auxiliary scanner just to ask it for some very basic information. Hilariously, a lot of these results will tell you what the inside and outside IP addresses and MAC addresses are of a particular host. If you have a Windows box with 10 network cards in it, and you ask, and it's got NetBIOS facing the internet, and you ask it very nicely, it will tell you what user is logged in, all the IP addresses, and all the MAC addresses associated with all of its networking. So that's fun too. So to that end, a best defense is a good offense, right? So run this sort of stuff on yourselves. If you're a security person who works at an organization or an IT person that works within your organization, you'll want to run this on yourselves just for the purposes of your own edification. You'll be able to spot outliers. Like, how many people in the room work for an organization or have ever worked for an organization that if you nmap without permission, they take you out to the parking lot and beat you to death with a tire iron? Like, yeah, I've been there. It's not fun. So let me get this straight. The bad guys can scan us all day. The bad guys can nmap us, the bad guys can hit us with their custom exploits, and we do nothing. Maybe we tweak some firewall rules, but me as a security guy who works in the organization that's being paid to secure the organization, I can't run my own scans? That doesn't make a lot of sense. The bad guys are way ahead of us now. Like, the bad guys have everything, and I got nothing because I need written permission from 15 directors, and I need to bring in a llama that can dance before I can do nmapping. That's right. So on more than one occasion, I have found at a variety of different clients, EC2 instances that existed without the knowledge of the IT or the security organizations within the company, hosted websites with shared credentials and private marketing information that were published without anybody in any organization outside of marketing knowing that they existed. So that's just really scary, weird liability that nobody wants. So use this on yourselves. If your company name shows up somewhere that it shouldn't be, investigate it. If you can even script this. If you're a fan of things like QRadar and ArcLight, you can pipe this into a SIM and have an alert pop if these things show up online. And to that end, Shodan also has a lot of really cool new search features that will allow you to do a lot more refinement of searches. Like, you work for abc.com, and let's say you go search for ABC and you find a whole bunch of results in like Romania. Well, maybe your company doesn't do any business with Romania and has no purpose being in Romania. So that'd probably be something very interesting to investigate. You can narrow those searches down like that. So you guys have been very, very awesome. Thank you for letting me rant. Here's my GitHub, and here's Paul's GitHub. If you want to stalk me, that's how you can stalk me. I have 12 minutes left, so please throw things, ask questions. How can I continue to rant? I have 12 more minutes to rant. Anybody have any questions?
The main question is responsible disclosure, but on such a broad scale, that's quite challenging. How did you handle that?
Well, that's a very broad question, right? So, like, if we go back to this thing, hey, look, somebody's using the ATM. Okay, so let's use this as a real-world example. Let's talk about responsible disclosure. How do I disclose that? I have no idea. Like, if I look up the IP address, it just says somewhere in Italy. There's no defining information in the video. There's no company name. I can't see any financial information. I can tell this is an ATM only by name. I don't see cards. There's no bank data. So technically speaking, there's nothing really private going on. Like, this is a camera in a public place. So how could I disclose that? Like, I could try, but what happens if I get it wrong? Like, I don't know what business operates this camera. So what happens if I disclose to the wrong party? So on the sheer scale of things, trying to contact every single business owner of every single system that I find is just a huge wealth of work. It's a lot easier to just show people and have them quietly fix it themselves. Or like in the case of CERN, I specifically searched for CERN, and then I did report all of my findings to CERN. So if I can find an organization that I can put my finger on and say, yes, this is blah, blah, blah company, and they have these vulns, I ball that up and I send it to them. But in cases like this, I don't know.
But I can imagine that even if you know the company name on such a broad scale, that would require weeks or months of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Weeks or months. It would take several people working full time just to do the private investigation style work of like scrolling through all this stuff and trying to maybe discern what the signs say, and then maybe they can get it right. So,
meaning you didn't have the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I do when I can.
Yeah, I understand.
I've been trolling while I've been talking, and I've gone to a lot of websites that I know and I'm involved with. Some show up there, some show up cannot find, some show up as 404. I'm getting a completely random set of results upon my first search criteria. Can you discuss that?
Yeah. So the way Shodan's backend works is John's got a bunch of scanning boxes spread all over the world, and they do their scans of their respective bits of the internet and then phone all the results home to a central database. That scan takes something like a month and a half to 2 months to go. So if you're looking at results that are sitting on a DHCP scope, you're going to have things change hosts. Like, for example, some of these cameras are, like the cameras specifically, a lot of them are living on like the people's homes or their DSL lines or their cable modems, and every once in a while those things change IP addresses. So I'm at the mercy of that networking environment, right? So if I'm looking at some IP address and that changes later, I have no control over that. The only thing that I can do is in my scanning tool define a specific path, and like that's how the screenshot tool works. It looks at a path of a known, for this particular camera, if you go to, it's like /now.jpg, I think. Let me see, can I type, cursor. So like, I'm pretty sure, if you just go like now.jpg, oops, I can't type either. Yeah, so the raw path is now.jpg, right? So I'll search for that, and that's my search criteria. And I'll put in my script, look for this path and see if you get a 200 OK. And if you get a 200 OK, write that to a file. And if you don't get a 200 OK, throw it away. So that's what I've come up with for now. But again, it's a question of like just the sheer magnitude. I'm doing this with my own, this is a pet project of mine. Like nobody's paying me for this. So like I only have my own personal resources. So if I had like a giant compute cluster and I could start doing things like looking at this file and doing like, fast Fourier stuff to it to see here's a section that's static and there's a section that's static over several days, and I could fingerprint the camera. Then I could build a database and I could say here's the camera and here's the different IP addresses it has moved back and forth to and things like that. But it's something that would be really nice to do, but it's sort of outside of the budget of zero. Any more questions? 7 minutes. No? I figured let's leave this up, maybe we get another customer.
Wait for the customer, or? My question is, do you look at the data over time? Do you think since you started this, stuff gets taken offline quicker? Or?
Well, sort of. So for the vast majority of it, it's kind of like playtime. I look at it once, it's kind of funny or it's interesting, I take a screenshot and then I move along. In the case of like CERN, for example, I actually contacted them and there was a lot of back and forth. And I wanted to make sure that, like, to me that's a big deal. Like, particle accelerator on the internet, you can mess with it, you can submit jobs to the compute cluster, that's a big deal. Being able to talk to like these gigantic pumps and change stuff, like the Copenhagen people were notified as well. So for the big stuff, I notify them, and then I will follow up later to see if the stuff is still there. It's about a 50-50 result. Some people take their stuff offline when they've been told that it's scary and shouldn't be connected to the internet, or they're French.
No, I was wondering more just on a general statistics point of view. That you say, okay, if you scan this IP address plus this port and it stays on, it gets taken offline quicker, since it becomes more aware that stuff is online.
So far that I've noticed, nobody is removing stuff based purely on quiet scanning. People are removing stuff after they've been told to remove stuff, because these scans tend to fall into the area of noise.
Yeah.
So like, if you've ever run TCP dump on a cable modem or a DSL line, you can see that 100% of the time, 24 hours a day, we're getting scanned by Romania, China, Russia, Korea, you name it. All these botnets everywhere are scanning the entire internet, trying to exploit known vulnerabilities all the time. So that stuff is too much of a pain, and there's too much overhead to look at every single firewall deny on the outside of a firewall. So people just don't pay any more attention. So this sort of stuff falls into that realm where it's not super high traffic. I only try once or twice. Nobody even notices. So the only way to get people to change their behavior is to actively poke them, like contact them and say, hey, your stuff is online. It shouldn't be online.
If I may continue, I've seen several presentations where they reference this site in which they find stuff. So yeah. I guess your site helped for researchers to find vulnerabilities and to find the scope of the problem. So I would imagine that then somebody publish something and then get a reaction and then stuff get taken offline. But I was wondering if you looked at those kind of statistics, what influence your site has just in general, or maybe it's
sort of. It's slightly different. Like the Zytel guys that presented on the DSL modems, like that's one manufacturer. So like these guys, IQ and Vision, there's only like 200 cameras online, and it is entirely up to the user to do what they want with the camera. So like, I haven't tried this myself, but like, this is just like the view of a camera. This isn't like getting shells and compromising the machine. Somebody knowingly connected this camera to the internet and knowingly set it up so that it could be accessed this way. So it's I think it's apples and oranges. It's slightly different. I mean, the volume in some cases is the same, but in this particular case with a lot of the stuff, like people knowingly put it online so that other people can get to it. And it's not just one vendor. It's really all over the place. So like I'm jumping around from different types of businesses to different pieces of hardware that are online. So it's a little harder. It's a little bit more murky.
Well, it seems a very interesting source of statistics for me. But
yeah.
All right. Thank you. Great
yeah.
call.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. If anyone has one.
No. Nobody?
No. All right, then we'll wrap it up. All I can say is thanks for scaring the shit out of us.
You're very welcome.